Hi, this is excellent peoples. You're listening to Your Morning Jacket. Your Morning Joe. Obviously. You're listening to the Your Morning Coffee podcast with Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart, weekly music news for the new music business. Take it away, guys.
From Billboard, record label market share Q3 2024. Island helps power Republic as Interscope makes big push.
And from Variety, inside TikTok's money squeeze on independent labels. This is a classic divide and conquer situation.
And from Billboard, artist tour riders behind the history, evolution, and yes, shockingly, Jay, excess of backstage life on the road. Well, with that story, Jay, we will be talking about brown M&Ms or the lack of brown M&Ms backstage from a particular band. So we're glad you're here. Jay and I are going to start the party right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Good to see you, my friend Jay. You are on the road at the moment, aren't you?
I am. Good to see you, too. I'm coming to you from beautiful Traverse City, Michigan. Saw a really incredible show last night with the Accidentals and Rebel Eves and many others that we played on the podcast last week. Just a fantastic show, fantastic trip, and it's really beautiful here. The leaves are all changing. They're gold and red and brown, and, you know, we don't really see a lot of that in Los Angeles, but it's just stunning here.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Well, Jay, I was looking at a bunch of stuff, and of course, if one thing I've learned when you and I are doing the podcast is the unbelievable rise of Latin music. And sure enough, Latin music revenue sets mid-year record of $685 million, says the RIAA. That's a Billboard piece by Griselda Flores. Latin increased 7% compared to the first half of 2023, led by paid streaming subscriptions.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I hate to say I told you so, but, you know, our friend Bruno Del Granado over at CAA has been, you know, keeping us schooled on Latin music for a while, and he told us to sort of watch this space, and he was absolutely right. Latin music revenue hit a record high of $685 million in the first half of 2024, and that's according to the RIAA's mid-year Latin music report, and that was released October 10th. According to the analysis, Latin music increased, as you said, 7% compared to the first half of 2023. That's led by paid streaming subscriptions, of course, which account for 2/3 of U.S. Latin revenue. Furthermore, Latin music revenues in the first half of the year once again grew faster than the overall recorded music market.
Man, so while the report doesn't specify which artists or genres are directly driving this mid-year record high, Latin music's bump can be contributed to a number of artists who are fueling a movement from Karol G to Peso Pluma, who are still riding high from a historic 2023, and newcomers like Xavi. It is safe to say that a diverse collective of acts have helped usher another record year for Latin music. Pretty exciting, man.
Very exciting. I saw a license plate last night at the show that it was abbreviated, of course, but it said Bad Bunny I thought that was pretty cool. So the next piece, just before we get into our stories, is something that you and I found interesting this week was a headline from Music Business Worldwide by Daniel Tenser. And the headline was Limp Bizkit's Fred Durst sues Universal for $200 million over alleged unpaid royalties. And, I took the complaint and, I ran it through ChatGPT-4 and said, summarize this thing for, a knucklehead that isn't a lawyer. And it was just phenomenal, going through this thing. And you and I have been talking about this a little bit. I don't know. There's a few red flags here for me, this whole Fred Durst and Limp Bizkit suing Universal, because the complaint it's long, and there's a lot in here of breach of contract and fraud and breach of fiduciary duty and fraudulent concealment and on and on and on. And I'm looking through this like I worked for Universal for 18 years. And does any company make mistakes from time to time? Absolutely. But, nefarious, intentional withholding, I don't know. This doesn't seem right to me. What do you think?
It doesn't. Well, something just doesn't smell right. And like you were saying, there's a bunch of stuff. There's a lot of big words and a lot of big legal words going on in this. But at the end of the day, I just find it hard to believe. Is it possible that somebody moved or there's a new accounting firm that's working on their royalties? Any of those things are possible. And you and I both remember when we worked for different record companies, it's really hard to track people. And so that's always a possibility. It's not nefarious. It's just people move. They don't leave forwarding addresses, all kinds of stuff. And with a band the size of Limp Bizkit, it just seems so unlikely.
Well, talk about that other thing you and I
were
were talking about before we hit record, that sometimes there are intermediaries, and sometimes it's not as clear that the music goes from Universal to their label. Sometimes there's a production company. Sometimes there are managers involved. It's a lot more complex than you might think.
It's absolutely true. And I shared with you a story that when I was working at EMI, we were working on a Raspberries title, and they didn't really want to participate in this kind of an anthology we're doing because they said they had been paid royalties. And we went back and looked, and according to the accounting office, they had been paid royalties, and it turns out they had sort of a sub deal that was like a production deal that they were signed to the production company, not directly to Capitol Records, if I recall correctly. And in the Music Business Worldwide article, they do mention that they signed in the 1990s with California indie label Flip Records with distribution from UMG's Interscope. So that kind of got my attention. Now, is that part of the problem? I don't know, but like you, we were kind of furiously texting when this first came out, and kind of sort of saying the same thing. It's like, we're missing something here. It just doesn't seem. Is it possible? It's certainly possible. Is it probable that all this stuff is being said is true? It's not probable. Yeah,
it doesn't really add up, but we'll see. We don't know all the ins and outs yet. I did have a good conversation with a very smart reporter over at The Guardian, who's doing a piece on this, which I can't wait to see. So put a pin in that. It just didn't feel right, and we wanted to mention it. Before we get any further, I wanted to add our congratulations to our friend Vicki Nauman from Cross Border Works. If you don't know Vicki, she works in music and technology and finance and gaming and startups, and just she's a force of nature, and we just love her. And this is her 10th anniversary. So congratulations, Vicki Nauman, Cross Border Works, on your 10-year anniversary.
And it's hard to stay at companies for 10 years. I know from experience. And Jay, your very busy Billboard podcast with Glenn Peoples, Colin Hay from Men at Work's Rise and Fall, starting over as a solo artist. That's got to be a great one. What a fun conversation I'm sure that was.
He is so great. We dropped that episode, and if you get a chance, check it out. He talks about, and very openly and honestly, I might add, about how, the rise and fall of Men at Work, and then he got signed to a record deal in Los Angeles by MCA and promptly got dropped, and he found himself in Los Angeles without a reason. And he started playing at Largo. And if you don't know about Largo, especially back then, it's in a newer building now, but it used to be, I think, on Fairfax in this small little club. And I used to go there frequently, like almost weekly, because you would see people like John Bryan and you would see Neil Finn come in and Benmont Tench. And on Wednesdays, I think it was Wednesdays, Colin Hay would go in there and just play acoustically, but he would tell these stories.
Yes.
And he really crafted this way that he plays live. Anyway, check it out. But one of the things that we called out from that, and I'd love to play a little bit of music from, it was something I wasn't really aware of, and I know you were. And it's this, it's a YouTube channel, but it's much more than that. It's Choir. And it's this guy, David Goldman and Nobu Adelman, a.k.a. Dabu. They started Choir back in 2011 as sort of a weekly drop-in singing event. And basically think of it this way, like you fill up a movie theater or something larger with a bunch of people that love to sing. An artist comes out and they sing together. But before the artist comes out, these two gentlemen, they basically teach the crowd their parts to sing this chorus. And I'm telling you, it's emotional, it's powerful. And the one for Colin Hay, Men at Work, they did Overkill. Let's listen to a couple
of my favorite songs.
Yeah, yeah. Let's listen to a couple of seconds of that.
Diving in too deep, possibly the complication, especially at night. Worry over situations. I know we'll be alright. Perhaps it's just imagination. Day after day it reappears. Night after night, my heartbeat shows the fear. Ghosts appear and fade away. Between the sheets only brings exasperation. It's time to walk the streets, smell the desperation. At least
Fantastic. Yeah, it's so moving. And I actually sung in the choir in high school. And just when you have all of those people singing, it's such a powerful thing. And I believe there's alcohol involved in choir as well.
Oh, I didn't know that part.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they started in bars, actually. So there was alcohol involved early on. This was before artists joined them. But yeah, it's really fun. And there's some of the great ones. David Byrne doing the David Bowie song, Heroes. There's Rick Astley with one. It's just, there's so many great ones. You kind of have to check. And the Patti Smith one that was done in New York was wonderful. And it's so entertaining and so fun. And highly recommended. Highly, highly recommended.
Yeah, go check out Choir on YouTube. Just some magic stuff.
Absolutely. By the way, Jay, Warner and Meta strike a multi-year licensing deal covering Instagram, Facebook, and for the first time, WhatsApp. This is a Music Business Worldwide article by our friend Murray Stassen. As first reported by Billboard, Warner Music Group's new deal with Meta also includes for the first time the technology giant's popular messaging app, WhatsApp. The agreement arrives 2 months after WMG rival Universal Music Group inked a global licensing deal with Meta, which also included WhatsApp for the first time.
Right. And Meta, meanwhile, appears to be developing AI tools at a rapid pace. Last Friday, the company introduced Meta Movie Gen, described by Meta as its quote-unquote breakthrough generative AI research for media. It includes advances in both text-to-image and text-to-video to create high-quality, high-definition images and videos, as well as an audio and music generation element. Meta said that it trained 13 billion parameter audio generation model that can take a video and optional text prompts and generate high-quality and high-fidelity audio of up to 45 seconds.
So those 45-second clips can include ambient sound effects like Foley, and instrumental background music, all synced to video content. On September 25th, Meta revealed that over 400 million people are using its Meta AI tools monthly, with 185 million people using it across the company's products each week. And of course, Meta is the artist formerly known as Facebook.
Yes, it is. Well, let's thank our sponsors.
Yes, indeed. Let's thank him. How about Soundtrack Music for Business? Soundtrack is the leading music streaming service for business, providing music to more than 80,000 businesses globally. The good news is that 33% of consumers discover new music they hear played in businesses such as restaurants, retail bars, hotels, etc. The bad news is that over 70% of U.S. small and mid-sized businesses are misusing music, resulting in a loss to music creators, rights holders, and the music industry to the tune of $1.3 billion per year in the U.S. alone.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more, jump over to soundtrack.app/artist-guide. Or there's also a link in the newsletter.
Yeah, there sure is. And, I've been learning a lot about this because of the team over there at Soundtrack. I had a friend of mine who opened a bar, and he didn't know. It wasn't nefarious. Exactly. He just didn't know that he had to have, licenses to play from different PROs to play music in his bar. And the great thing about Soundtrack is they're not looking to squeal on anybody, or they're looking to make this easy. So if you have an establishment, or if you want to learn about this, they're great at education. Check out Soundtrack. And also a special thank you to Music.ai. Music.ai is a trailblazing AI-powered music and audio platform, and it offers an expansive suite of over 50 stackable AI audio solutions. You want to change the tempo or pitch of your song, adjust instruments or vocals, mute background noise in a movie, Music.ai makes it easy. Embraced by record labels, agencies, tech firms, and developers, Music.ai is synonymous with audio innovation. With over 45 million users, their tools process over 2 million minutes of audio every day. They can process yours. Go visit Music.ai to get started.
And I've been having a lot of fun with that. I can just
Me
tell you
too.
that. So, also thanks to Bandzoogle, built by musicians for musicians. Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform that makes it easy to build a stunning website and online store for your music in minutes. All the features you need are already built in, including dozens of fully customizable templates, tools to sell your music and merch, commission-free crowdfunding and fan subscription features, mailing list tools to grow your fan list, integrations with Bandcamp, SoundCloud, YouTube, Bands in Town, and more, so you can easily add content from your other online profiles, and live support from their musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Website plans start at just $8.29 a month, which includes hosting and your own free custom domain name. Your Morning Coffee podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com to try it free for 30 days and use the promo code MORNINGCOFFEE, that is all one word, by the way, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code MORNINGCOFFEE.
Yeah, a special thank you to our friends over at Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are changing how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. Edited daily by our friend Bruce Houghton, with help from Alana Bonilla. Hypebot and sister blog Music Think Tank are published by live music discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town.
You betcha. Bands in Town. Over 80 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It's the #1 artist service platform connecting over 590,000 artists with their superfans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates across all platforms, and it is always on the first page on my iPhone.
Yes, sir.
Yes, indeed. And by the way, I am so lucky because every week I get to hang out with my friend of, let's just say, a lot of years. He's Jay Gilbert. He's a music industry consultant. He's the curator of the weekly Your Morning Coffee newsletter and a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, and Warner Music Groups. And he is happy that his Vikings are undefeated this season.
Well, hope springs eternal. And I got to say, I am so fortunate that I get to look forward to doing this podcast every weekend with my good friend Mike Etchart, longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records. You got to check out that book. Warner Music, Capital EMI, and Universal Music Group, where Mike and I sort of bonded over our love for music minutia and collecting bootleg recordings. Shh, don't tell anybody about that. And maybe even an occasional cheeseburger.
That's exactly right. So let's jump into the stories, Jay. Story number one from Dan Reese over at Billboard. Record label market share Q3 of 2024. Island helps power Republic as Interscope makes big push. The huge success of Sabrina Carpenter and Chappell Roan, in addition to Taylor Swift's enduring power, sees Island Records help Republic Records maintain the top spot in the industry.
Man, they are a beast. As of the third quarter of 2024, as that comes to a close, a familiar label is atop the current market share standings again, and that is Republic. For the second straight quarter, they maintain a market share north of 15%, and that's a remarkable achievement.
It really is. But while the story of Republic's second quarter was the dominance of Taylor Swift, whose Tortured Poets Department remains far and away the biggest album of the year so far, more than doubling the second place title and still going strong, the story of its third quarter is the huge surge of Island Records, which is included under Republic Records' market share alongside Mercury Records, Big Loud Records, Cash Money, and indie distributor Imperial.
Yeah, and that's buoyed by the breakout success of Sabrina Carpenter and Chappell Roan. Island posted a 3.81%, almost 4% current share, and that's defined as released within the past 18 months. That's current. For the 3 months between June 27th and September 26th. If Island were broken out on its own, that would have been good for 7th among all labels for that period, which is incredible, which boosted its 9-month current market share to 2.15%, about 3.5 times higher than its current market share was through the first 9 months of last year, while that 3.81% mark for the third quarter was 6.5 times higher than the corresponding 3-month period in 2023, with Carpenter's Short and Sweet and Chappell Roan's The Rise and Fall of the Midwest Princess at number 1 and number 2 on the Billboard 200. This week of the first week of the fourth quarter, that momentum is likely to continue.
Right. So that helped Republic Records post a 15.21% current market share through the first 9 months of the year, itself a huge jump from its industry-leading 12.28% through 3 quarters of last year. But it wasn't just Island. Republic itself is still floating on its Tortured Poets Department high, while Post Malone's F1 Trillion helped Big Loud and Mercury contribute to Republic's share as well. And while Republic has receded slightly from the 15.72% it posted at mid-year when it outstripped the entire Warner Music Group, any label putting up a number higher than 15% is really and truly enjoying a massive year.
Yeah, they sure are. And check out the charts and graphs, little pie charts they put in here. It makes all of this so much easier to digest because you can just at a glance look and see, well, there's Warner Music Group, there's Universal Music Group, there's Sony Music Group, and there are the indies. And for current, as you just said, Universal Music Group is by far the leader, with nearly 37% market share. Then you have Sony Music Group at about 26%, Warner Music Group 16%, and then the indies, a respectable 21.21%. And that's Q3 current market share. So on the other coast, the West Coast, Universal Music Group's other juggernaut, Interscope, Geffen, A&M, also saw a huge surge in the third quarter, and that boosted its 9-month current share into double digits, as it posted a 10.13% market share, up from about 9.5% at the mid-year mark and 8.5% it held through the same period last year. I know that's a lot of numbers coming at you. The enduring success of Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us, which will get a Super Bowl bump early next year, of course, and Billie Eilish's Still Hot, Hit Me Hard and Soft album helped Interscope become the only other label to reach higher than 10%. Interscope's share also includes Verve Label Group.
A lot of label groups over there at Universal. Mm-hmm. The success of both Republic and Interscope, the two labels around which UMG reorganized earlier this year, helped parent company Universal improve more than 2 percentage points, in current share over the same period last year, jumping from 34.61% through 9 months in 2023 to almost 37% this year. That gain has come at the expense of the other two majors, of course, which slipped a bit year over year. Sony Music Group dipped from 27.5% through the first 9 months of 2023 to almost 26% through the first 3 quarters of 2024, while Warner Music Group dropped from 17.46% last year to 16.25% this year for the same period, though the latter recovered enough from its 15.68% mark at mid-year to climb back above Republic Records.
Yeah, and year over year, the indie sector by distributor ownership also grew up to 21.21%, as we pointed out, and that's 21.21% current share through the first 9 months of this year, as opposed to 20.43 during the same period last year. A significant uptick. The biggest song of the year so far, of course, is Shaboozie's, a bar song, Tipsy. That was released by Indie Empire. And it's interesting to note that Empire does not report its market share to Luminate, so its individual share can't really be broken out. Come on there, you guys, report that stuff. So by label ownership, the indie sector remains a big segment of the business, racking up 37.09% current share of the market, though that has come down a little bit, from the 39.5% it had through the same period, 2023.
So beyond Republic and Interscope, there is more good news from Warner Records, which includes the catalog label Rhino and parts of Warner Nashville. And it says it stays on the hot streak it has been on for the entirety of 2024. Its 6.5% 9-month mark helps keep it in third place once again, a full percentage point above fourth place Atlantic, which includes 300 Elektra Entertainment, which posted a 5.5% current mark, better than its first 2 quarters, but still down significantly from its 7.39% mark at 3-quarter period of 2023. Remarkably, despite coming out of the gate so hot this year, Warner Records hasn't cooled down. It's almost 7%. Third quarter was its best 3-month period of the year, actually.
Right. So we first talked about current. This is overall, and in a minute we'll talk about catalog. But in 5th and 6th place are a pair of Sony music labels that move up a spot in the rankings year over year, though both dropped in market share over the same period last year. And that's Columbia Records, which includes some RED labels in its share. They posted a 4.41% current market share, a slight uptick from its mid-year 4.35%, but down from last year's 4.93%. Again, sorry about all the numbers here, when it was 6th. And RCA at 4.30%, a dip from the 4.64% it had 9 months into 2023, though it's up from 7th to 6th for this quarter. And finally, Capitol Music Group in 7th place so far this year posted a 4.04% current share. Through 9 months of 2023, it was 4th place at 6%.
The folks over at Epic Records with several high-flying hip-hop releases this year from Future boosts his share from 2.39% 3 quarters through 2023 to 2.79% through the first 3 quarters of this year, rising to 8th place, while Sony Nashville over at 2.1%, down from 2.5%, and Sony Music Latin a little over 2%, up from 1.96 last time. Round out the top 10 labels by current share.
Yeah, and that was all current. I'm sorry, I jumped the gun on the overall. This is overall. So overall market share, which combines all labels' releases in the marketplace, rather than this just those in the last 18 months, right? That's new release after 18 months is catalog. So it sort of rearranges the board slightly, having overall market share, which includes all those new releases. With slightly improved totals from last year's period, Atlantic's vast catalog means that it leapfrogs Warner Records into third with a 7.66% overall share. That was down 8.3% from last year, while Warner's 6.86%, up from 6.63% in 2023. It sort of sees it, moving from 5th place from last year to 4th place this year. So Capitol and Columbia come in 5th and 6th, though in a virtual tie at about 5.87%. Capitol edged out Columbia by 0.003 of a percentage point, essentially a rounding error, right? So RCA, 5.03%, Epic, 2.75%, Sony Nashville, 2.07%, and Universal Music Group, 1.84% round out the top 10.
Well, among the label groups, overall market share remained largely static year over year. UMG and Sony each inched up a little teeny bit. In the case of UMG, about 38.5% and about 27.25% respectively year over year, while Warner dipped slightly to a little under 18.5%, and the indies at 15.85% remained flat. The catalog side is largely the same story. UMG dipped 0.2% year over year, while Sony gained 0.5 point, and WMG and the indies were down slightly. Among the individual labels, Interscope took the top catalog slot, jumping over Republic to take an almost 10% share of the market, with Republic's a little under 9% edging out Atlantic's 8.39%. Catalog. Yeah. Being another big driver, of course, with all of this stuff. And by the way, go back to the newsletter to see all the pictures and everything. It makes a lot more sense
when
you're
sort
looking
of see
at
those charts. Yeah, absolutely,
exactly.
Well, let's jump
business
in.
is good, Jay.
Oh, sorry
business
to cut
is
you
good.
off. Go ahead.
That's okay. I was just gonna say, but business is good for crying out loud. For just about everybody.
Business is good. The market share sort of, that's that pie, and the slices kind of change shapes from time to time, but not really drastically. But boy, Republic, they're having a moment. Jumping into our number 2 story, inside TikTok's money squeeze on independent labels. This is a classic divide and conquer situation, and that was by Jem Aswad over at Variety. And it starts off by saying that earlier this year, when TikTok and Universal Music Group sort of locked horns over their licensing agreement, and the world's largest music company removed nearly all of its artists and songwriters' work from the platform, UMG faced challenges making its case in a court of public opinion.
Right. So UMG CEO and chairman, of course, Lucian Grange, wrote in an open letter dated back on January 30th, TikTok proposed paying our artists and songwriters at a rate that is a fraction of the rate that similarly situated major social platforms pay. He said, ultimately, TikTok is trying to build a music-based business but without paying fair value for the music.
Yeah, but as Jem points out, fair points, however, UMG had trumpeted robust earnings, had approved a $150 million bonus for Lucian Grange, and was silencing its artists and songwriters who'd been pressured for years to find ways to, quote-unquote, go viral on TikTok, on the most influential platform for music in the last 5 years. So the ban, which began in February and lasted 3 grueling months, affected songs by Universal artists like Harry Styles and Elton John to Ice Spice. But most affected were the non-superstar artists, and I think that goes largely missed, many of whom have had invested significant time and money in promoting their music on TikTok.
Right. So rather than joining the fight, UMG's competitors rushed their artists' music into the gap left by the ban, admitting privately that it was great for us to have so much superstar competition out of the picture. But after a few weeks, music by UMG artists like Ariana Grande and Camila Cabello began quietly returning to the platform. And when Taylor Swift, who, don't forget, owns her masters and licenses them to UMG and thus was not bound by its stance, began promoting her upcoming album, The Tortured Poets Department, on TikTok. UMG swiftly announced a new agreement.
I see what you did there.
Yes, so there you go. That it claimed will deliver improved remuneration for UMG songwriters and artists, new promotional engagement opportunities for their recordings and songs, and industry-leading protections with respect to generative AI. So, as Jem said, call it a draw at best.
Yes, but 4 months later, Universal's stance seemed a lot more urgent, and that's because now TikTok is putting the squeeze on a much more vulnerable target, independent labels. Apparently, with no advance notice, TikTok announced that it's ending its deal with Merlin, a 500-plus member nonprofit independent label trade group that was created to place indies on a more equal footing with the majors, and instead will negotiate with each label individually. Holy cow, 500 members, each one individually. While TikTok claims that this move is due to what it describes as rampant fraud that Merlin has been unsuccessful in combating, multiple sources scoff at that characterization and say that the platform is using a divide and conquer strategy to break Merlin's collective power. One indie label source said, no matter what they say, this is purely about money. And that reminds me, Mike, of my favorite quote of all time from Henry Droz. It's not about the money. It's about the money.
When in doubt, always remember that phrase. So reps for Merlin declined comment for this article, but a letter to members sent last week and first reported by Billboard reads in part, we believe the most likely reason that TikTok did this is that TikTok does not want to pay a fair rate for the music that powers their platform. If this is right, then TikTok does not value independent music, the independent labels and distributors who support that music, nor the diverse artists who create it. Their approach suggests that they believe their objectives can be better served by fragmenting the Merlin membership in order, we believe, to minimize their payout.
In basic terms, Merlin operates like a union for more than 500 companies, many of which are distributors that in turn represent more than 30,000 individual labels, including artists like Phoebe Bridgers, Shabuzi, and Mitski. It uses its collective strength to protect and maximize the value of our members' music, according to the letter, which continues, quote, we have worked productively and collaboratively with TikTok and this quote-unquote fraud issue, and until now, no concerns have been raised about the approach Merlin is taking. We have implemented measures to address illegitimate activity and content, automated systems to detect suspicious activity, and a dedicated team to address issues and impose sanctions, including ultimately termination of membership for bad actors. These claims were seconded by other sources who also note that music is uploaded directly from labels onto TikTok without passing through Merlin or any middlemen.
Right. So as noted by Music Business Worldwide, TikTok's fraud claims primarily center around companies or individuals in South America, Eastern Europe, and Southeast Asia that it says are uploading hundreds of
illegal recordings of songs by Beyonce and other superstars, which are in some cases slowed down or sped up in order to evade the company's detection software. Why would this benefit Merlin? So it could falsely increase its market share and thus be on more equal footing with the majors. TikTok sources speculate to fierce denials from Merlin, adding that cutting out Merlin will allow indie labels to negotiate deals with the platform that are as good or better than the ones Merlin negotiated in the past. They say in some cases that may be possible. In a different but related situation, the National Music Publishers Association ended its blanket agreement with TikTok earlier this year, leaving its members with the option to negotiate their own deals. Sources tell Variety that at least one large publisher did get an improved deal, although two smaller ones said they did not.
So it goes on to say that TikTok sources also maintain that even though the company has laid off dozens of staffers, including members of its own music team, without backfilling positions, it will do a much better job of policing fraud on its platform than it could in a partnership with Merlin. Multiple sources say that the independent label community dispute those assertions. While unable to share those documents due to non-disclosure agreements, sources say that they are aware of at least 3 different TikTok contracts that have been offered to various labels with drastically different terms. One said that the rate it is being offered is quote-unquote less than half of the previous Merlin deal, and that TikTok's reps are imposing take-it-or-leave-it type negotiations that one characterized as veiled threat, leaving the labels with little choice but to sign or see their music removed from the platform by the time Merlin that deal expires on November 1st.
Wow. They also note the abruptness of the move and the short time span TikTok is giving independent labels to sign new agreements. Labels were given 1 week to sign a non-disclosure agreement sent on September 27th attached to the new deal, although TikTok insists labels have until October 25th to sign without disruption. As for how TikTok's diminished staff will negotiate individual contracts with more than 500 companies, by the way, that's comprising 30,000 plus labels.
Wow.
Well, realistically, it won't. Sources believe the company will focus primarily on the largest ones and send the majority take it or leave it standardization contracts. It seems likely that many of the smaller independent labels will decline to sign and see their music disappear from the platform. It's 170 million users in the U.S. The country's total population, by the way, is just under 335 million, according to the U.S. Census Bureau.
Wow. Well, TikTok's battle with UMG was a relatively evenly matched, but TikTok's 2023 revenue in the United States alone was some $16 billion, according to the Financial Times. And its China-based parent company, ByteDance, posted $120 billion. Wow. Independent labels, on the other hand, comprised around 31.5% of recorded music's total global market revenue of $35.1 billion in 2023, according to Media Research, just over $10 billion. In other words, the entire global recorded music industry posted slightly more than double the revenue TikTok earned in the U.S. alone. And by cutting out Merlin, TikTok turns a single unified entity into hundreds of significantly smaller ones. It's a classic case of divide and conquer, one source said.
Yeah, so in a statement, a TikTok rep said TikTok has the utmost respect for the independent music community and artist and is committed to offering all the world's music on the platform. We have had operational challenges with Merlin in the past where music is not quality controlled for copyright is delivered. In other words, it claims fraudulent activity was detected on a large but unspecified percentage of Merlin member labels. It presents a big burden, and doing direct deals allows us to exercise better control and also to forge closer relationship with Merlin members.
Okay, however, 3 independent label sources tell Variety that the rates they have been offered on the new contract drafts are lower than the soon-to-expire Merlin deal. TikTok always has paid considerably less in royalties than streaming services, almost nothing, according to a 2022 report in Billboard, almost nothing, claiming that because it's not a traditional digital service provider and users only experience a portion of an entire song, the company shouldn't have to pay a full rate. It also pays less than platforms like YouTube, Snap, and Meta, but more valuable are the promotional opportunities the platform offers, such as placement and ad credits that can be used to boost a song's visibility. The sources note that many of these assets are missing from the new proposed deal and are, some of the protections and guardrails for artists and rights holders.
So the sources also say that Merlin has been asking for more assistance from TikTok in policing fraud, but that it declined to collaborate, claiming it didn't have the resources. They also say that TikTok's fraud detection technology is subpar at best, and that many of the violations were noticed by the company's music staff or the labels themselves. One source adds, indie distributors also need to be better at policing what is uploaded on their end before it goes to platforms, because that does muddy the waters for legitimate indie labels.
That's true. Fraud is a real threat in the streaming business, and like scalping in the ticket world, it's a never-ending game of whack-a-mole, yet TikTok has shown no willingness to cooperate or collaborate, and they're eliminating their number one partner in combating fraud, one indie label source said. Went on to say, I feel like we'll sign the deal and then never hear from them again. It's going to be the Wild West.
So some speculate that the motivation for this move, as well as TikTok's combative negotiations with Universal and earlier Warner Music, is due to a company-wide mandate to cut costs at every opportunity in advance of a partial or entire sale, which is at least partially related to the upcoming presidential election and long-standing pressure from factions in the U.S. government for ByteDance to sell TikTok's U.S. division such as the lawsuits filed Monday by attorneys general from 14 states alleging that the platform has addicted young people and harmed their mental health. Reps for TikTok strenuously denied those claims. Strenuously, Jay, they denied those claims.
Yeah, well, here we go.
There's such a, they're so important to the ecosystem of music, and yet all this stuff is happening, and it sure don't feel good.
No, I hope they can work these things out, because it's so important, as you said. And our final story, this is from Morena Dewey at Billboard. The headline was "Artist Tour Writers Behind the History, Evolution, and Excess of Backstage Life on the Road. From Van Halen's M&Ms to Taylor Swift's Chocolate Milk, artist tour demands are the stuff of legend, but the writer evolved from relatively practical concerns."
Yes, it did. Well, and this is maybe one of the funnest stories that I read in the newsletter this week, which is, and we've talked about this. We've seen a lot of this stuff. And of course, if you haven't heard the story of Van Halen and their demanding in their writer, their hospitality writer, actually, that there are no brown M&Ms in their bowl of M&Ms is stuff of legend.
Mm-hmm.
But, as you read the story, it was really interesting. And there's some historical stuff of how this kind of came to be. And, you really do forget that, back in the day, and the day being even through the 1960s, there was just very substandard everything. Bands would go into a town and it was just, dressing in like a gymnasium locker room, very substandard PA systems, no water, anything backstage. So one of the interesting things in the article points out is just kind of how this stuff evolved over the years and kind of to where we are today. But you see why it happened and see why kind of things got to where they are now.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the first things is, and Morena knows about this, of course, and she touches on it in the article, the Van Halen situation, right? There was this book, Crazy from the Heat, from David Lee Roth, and he sort of explained that, the request for the brown M&Ms, there was a reason behind that, and it was a safety assessment. With tons of stage equipment, high-powered electronics, pyrotechnics, and large crowds, the sort of, humble brown M&M was a warning signal to see if the stagehands had been paying attention to every detail in that rider, in that contract. And that was for the safety of the band, crew, and the audience.
Right. So in the book he wrote, Van Halen was the first band to take huge productions into tertiary third-level markets. He said we'd pull out with 9 18-wheeler trucks full of gear where the standard was 3 trucks max. And there were many, many technical errors, whether it was the girders couldn't support the weight or the flooring would sink in or the doors weren't big enough to move the gear through. The contract rider read like a version of the Chinese Yellow Pages because there was so much equipment and so many human beings to make it function.
Right. So we're talking about that Van Halen thing, just so we're on the same page. So just as a little test, in the technical aspect of the rider, it would say Article 148, there will be 15 amperage voltage sockets at 20-foot spaces, evenly, providing 19 amps. And the article number 126 in the middle of nowhere was, there will be no brown M&Ms in the backstage area upon pain of forfeiture of the show and full compensation. And again, the reason for that is because they wanted to make sure that this rider, these contracts were actually being looked at because somebody's life was at stake.
Exactly. And that, I think, is one of the funnest parts of this article, is kind of the fact that these were kind of little tests to make sure everybody was reading everything. And of course, you have in contract writers, if you don't provide what they are asking for, then they have the right to hold back money. And so very fascinating article, highly recommended, and do check it out in the newsletter. It was really a fun article. Good one to put in there, Jay. Great story.
Yeah, it was really good. And by the way, before we leave, I just want to mention that Morena Dewey, you really have to read this full article. She really digs into some of these writers. Some of them are a little bit silly, and some of them are life or death, like the Van Halen one. But I think you'll be surprised at what Taylor Swift or some of these other artists have in their writers, like Jimmy Buffett or Michael Jackson or whoever, Beyonce. It's a very compelling piece and well done by Morena.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up the show, we want to say if you enjoyed the show, please tell one friend. Don't thank one friend, tell one friend. We would certainly appreciate it, and then in turn we would thank you. So there you have it. So big thanks to Soundtrack, Bandzoogle, Music.ai, Hypebot, and Bands in Town, and of course to my good friend Jay Gilbert as well. So on behalf of Jay and myself, Mike Etchart, we say thanks for listening, and he and I will be back next week on the Your Morning Coffee podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.